This is the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Kendall of the notaballerina.com travel blog. Every episode I'll share travel tales from several fellow travel lovers, and together we hope to entertain and inspire you, remind you of some of your own great travel experiences, and encourage you to hit the road again soon. Hello and welcome to episode 281 of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast on regenerative and sustainable travel. A chunky, important topic, I reckon, and I've got three really cool guests who all talk on some aspect of how we can travel in a way that's hopefully unharmful to the world and perhaps even useful and giving back in some way. So we'll get to that in a second. First, of course, I wanted to pay my respects to the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, where I'm recording this podcast today. I'm actually recording this on Sunday afternoon, and it's just beautiful day. We have the sea breeze is back. We have beautiful sea breezes here in Perth in the summer, and it is just one of those perfect days. Until I hit record, I did have my windows wide open, but it's a little bit too windy, might make for a noisy podcast. So it is just a perfect sunny, breezy day, and I love that kind of that part of December and sometimes into January and February. Not when it's too hot. It's just perfect. So let me get back to the topic. I'm just staring out the window as I chat to you all. But I want to talk about regenerative and sustainable travel today. And I also want to acknowledge that I have, I really appreciate the diversity of guests that I get to talk to in general, but especially on this episode. So my first guest is a German who lives in Australia, but speaks to me from Egypt. My second is a Slovak living in Switzerland, and my third, an American living in Belize. And just sort of recognising this, the diverse locations and backgrounds gives me some hope that there are people literally across the globe thinking hard about these important issues. So let's take some hope from that. Anyway, let's get on with it. So my first guest today is Dr. Susanne Etti. So she is actually the Global Environmental Impact Manager for Intrepid Travel. So lots of relevant experience. I actually chatted with Susanne when she was in Cairo for COP27. In fact, she definitely proved to me she was in Cairo. I could literally see the pyramids through her hotel window when I chatted. We had a wide-ranging conversation, but for the purposes of today's podcast, the section I've chosen is, we start off by talking about flying, and I ask her some questions. Can we still take flights? Can we be sustainable and still fly? Because I really like to travel and I really need to fly to get places from here. So I asked Susanne about her thoughts.
That's a very good one, and I absolutely agree with you. Australia plays quite a special role in here because, as you said, in Europe we have so many more opportunities to get around by train, but like even getting here to Egypt to attend COP27, obviously I had to take a long-haul flight because there's no way, as I'm like you, based in Australia. So, and it is really, we do know that planes do the big elephant in the rooms, the aviation industries. But yeah, as you said, here in Australia, we do need to take a flight to do any international travel. So what I really see, it's this kind of like, not saying we don't fly at all, because it then kind of would completely limit what we could actually do, but is to be more cautious that we are not flying 6 times a year an international flight, but actually make flights count. So like in my case, it's like, yes, I flew into Sharm el-Sheikh to attend COP27 on behalf of Intrepid Travel, but then it's kind of like staying some time here in Cairo to join the team. We have an office here to explore. Also, I had the chance to see a bit of Cairo, but then to kind of continue to Europe, like to UK and Germany. So I think the message is really like, make your flight count. Think about kind of how can you make that flight actually last longer, combine trips, and kind of like that's, I think, is the big thing. And when you are, say, arriving, like myself will arrive in the UK midweek, is like, how can I then, while I'm in Europe, actually take leverage of the ground transport and minimize the flying. So I think a big part is really just about to be mindful when we do take long haul flight, really make them count, because that also helps the communities when you stay longer, rather when we just kind of arrive 2 nights and go, we're not adding any value to the community. We also don't really have the chance to really experience the beauty of the country we're just visiting.
Oh, absolutely. I like that phrase, making your flights count. And, I often talk about slow travel, which is kind of, exactly. Similar to what you're talking about there. So,
no, absolutely.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting. I reckon, thanks to COVID, we can do this more easily because you can still probably work while you're doing some of these things and combine work with some extra travel time in a way that most bosses would not have let you before. But now that they've discovered that when people work from home or work from anywhere, that they actually still do their work, then perhaps, I'm hoping, I don't know, I'm self-employed, so it's easy for me to say this, but do you think that, there's more flexibility in the workplace now, and so this is now more possible?
Yeah, no, totally agree with you. For those that in a workforce where remote working is possible, I think this is a huge new opportunity. Destinations are recognizing that now, that people will actually come to work and have to rethink also how they maybe engage with those travelers, because they're actually maybe staying longer, enjoying the stay, but maybe just do on the weekend smaller trips, day trips, or want to actually experience what it's like living like a local in a destination. But also our workplace is exactly what you just asked or suggested, is supporting this. So once I'm in Europe, I'm actually spending some time and working from home at my parents' place in Bonn, which is wonderful because I can, after 3 years, kind of, obviously we were quite locked down in Australia and international flights kind of were quite very reduced, having that time, but also the opportunity being in a global role is to then really make that flight work, but then engage with people that are doing European time hours. So
yeah, of course. Oh, that works in on several levels in your role then,
definitely.
Doesn't it? Yeah.
Definitely.
Oh, that's so lovely. And especially for families like yours who are split across continents, to be able to get back and spend some significant time, not just pop by for the weekend on your way home because you have to get back to work, but if you can be there and have some nice home-cooked meals. And
I think that's what I'm looking forward to, and going to the local bakery and just, there's things like obviously globalization, like nowadays we all over the world we find things like and getting shipped, but then there's always something very special to kind of go to the local shops that are kind of still privately owned maybe, and small businesses, and just to kind of have their kind of local food that isn't being kind of exported. And we live close to also a very lovely vineyard area, like you mentioned, like down in Heilbronn. We have the Ahr area, and again, it's just beautiful. That's wine isn't exported to Australia. It's different, and it's just kind of enjoying this local food.
Yeah. Oh, that's really special. Okay, I have another question related to flying. So when I fly, I always do a carbon offset, and every year or so I try and research and find, what's the best one? And then I often ask in my Facebook group about this, and some people will say, actually, none of them are any good. You shouldn't do it. Do something else with your money instead. And I have very mixed feelings about it because I want to do something. I have to fly, but I want to do something. Yeah. Well, I don't know. What do you think? What should I be doing?
It's a really good question. And also, hey, well done for making that step, because that's really what I always suggest is first of all, to make your flight count, stay long, don't just hop over. But then also, and I did the same thing, is to measure what your flight actually means in carbon emissions, to do that part. And yes, the carbon offset is definitely, I think, has been a lot in the press recently. I think there's question around integrity, additionality. Does it really provide the benefits they're claiming? So I think there's two things. One is definitely around the important part, what you're doing already, and I encourage listeners is to really measure your impact of your flight once you do fly. And then around the carbon offset is to use, like Intrepid itself is also being carbon neutral, so we offset all our trip emission and office emission, is to use high standard carbon offsets, like from the gold standard, that has the core benefits. And the emphasis is on the core benefits, so that this project actually provides core benefits that are either economically, environmental, or social or cultural to the communities. So, for example, taking maybe an example from Australia is cultural burning practices. So there's savanna burning projects in the Northern Territory, and the core benefits there are really about that it supports First Nation peoples to return to land, to stay on land. It's supporting language. Local rangers are involved. So then the focus shifts really to the core benefits. But I think the other alternative is also, and I think that would be my first step, but also otherwise it's also to look at, are there maybe local projects that are really meaningful to you in you where you live? Or is it something that maybe to look at, is there a non-for-profit organization in the destination that you're going to travel to, where you could actually support on the ground with your money? And you can always work out, take an assumption what a 1 ton of CO2 costs, and use this money then as a donation.
I loved this chat with Susanna, and she gave me so much food for thought, but also just the now in retrospect fairly obvious thing that when I'm concerned about offsetting my flights, I don't necessarily have to choose the typical, tree planting carbon offset program. There's lots of different ways that I can, so to speak, make up for having taken that flight. I also really love her idea of making the flights count and, leaning into slow travel and, lots of ways that we can make it more worthwhile. So lots of food for thought. And as a listener, I'd love you also to ponder this question. It might be that you've already pondered it in depth and have a good solution. In that case, tell me what you're doing. But also, I do want to emphasize there's no right or wrong solution. And I don't think you need to feel guilty about flying, especially if you're already listening to a podcast about thoughtful travel, then you are obviously thinking about these sorts of issues. So, but what do you do about flights these days? Are you trying to cut down on them? Do you take into account, shorter routes or, more direct routes? Are you offsetting the carbon emissions of your flight in some way, etc.? I'd love to hear more about it. Or I'd love, even if you don't come into a Facebook or LinkedIn group and chat, but I'd really like to think that it, does stop some people in their tracks a little bit to think about these important issues. I've still got lots of thinking to do, but it was a really worthwhile chat with Susanna. Now, my next guest is Diana Fischer from Detours Zürich, and Diana and I met about a year ago. In fact, she enrolled in my social media summer school, so something I run with my my business hat on, and I loved her business from the first I heard about it. It was well, you'll hear more about it and you'll understand why. So we chatted recently and I learnt more about how and why she set up her business Detours Zürich. And I really wanted to showcase it because I think, I hope it encourages other tourism businesses to be as thoughtful as she is, and that encourages regular travellers like us to seek out these kinds of tourism businesses when we are travelling.
The business is called Detours Zürich, and I offer social impact walking tours. And the idea came actually during pandemic, because as the world was, on pause and we couldn't travel anywhere, I still remember that feeling of insecurity if we ever gonna be traveling again, and if yes, how it's gonna look like. I realized that it was probably a sign that we have to do things differently, that we probably cannot go back to business as usual as it was before. I felt it was a sign also from nature and from the world that we have been too busy, too fast, too focused on growth and bringing more people, making more money. And suddenly everyone had to stop, right? I work in travel, yes, 10 years, more than 10 years. And I really started to be interested in, how this pandemic will change the way we travel, or, how it's going to affect the future. So I started to really research. I went online, I went to LinkedIn, I started to follow people who were, leaders in the industry. I came across work of Anna Pollock and Bill Reed. I learned about regenerative tourism, and that just completely made sense to me. It resonated with me a lot. Just this thought that it is simply not enough just doing less harm in terms of sustainability, but that we have to think in a different way how we can contribute to a better life already with having the business, or be regenerative in a nature. Then I joined the course in summer 2021 with probably this community of tourism collab and Diane Dredge, where I met many inspirational people who already do a lot in tourism and who already do a really great things. Our common friend Debbie Clark, for instance, very inspirational person. So I started to really get into this topic, and I always wanted to have my own business. And now all this new knowledge that I acquired really led me to believe that I can conceptualize something that can embody these values. So I designed Detours Zurich, and basically I based it on the questions I asked myself: how can I, as business, contribute to a better life in my community? How can I, as business, create value? How can I, as business, be a part of a solution to current challenges that we are facing? So then I was starting to think about the concept and the design of these walking tours. First of all, Zurich is a great city in a sense that it's very diverse. So it's very small, like in comparison to, I don't know, any big capitals. Like it's only 400,000. So it's a financial capital of Switzerland, but it's very, very diverse and also very different than it seems on a first glance. So, when you come, you have a certain image. Okay, this is Zurich, but it's nothing like that. So it's very, very different.
I have to come back.
Yes, it has a different districts, different areas, which has different, history, different vibe, different architecture. So I saw a lot of potential also in that diversity factor. And I started to think, like, how I'm going to design the tour that can help local community, that can leave a positive impact in the community. So the only way for me was to design experiences that would be co-created together with local community. And I started to look for a local partners who did something good in in the NGOs or non-profit organization, different local projects, sustainable businesses. And I started to work with them, and together we designed these tours. And each tour, so it's called Detour because it should evoke that it's something different. So a different.
I love that. It's a great name.
Yeah. Model, thank you, of sightseeing, and also the topics would be different. So basically, the whole idea of partnering with local organization is to raise awareness about certain challenges or certain issues that we face today. So each tour is therefore themed around certain topic. So at the moment, I have 3 tours. One is themed around social solidarity, and the second about immigration, and the third one about ethical chocolate making. And with each tour, if you would come, you also support local community. So part of the ticket goes to that organizations that I work with. But I also really wanted to, the visitors that come to also meet those who they support. So it's not going to be only like, I 5 francs from your ticket goes to this and that organization, but I really wanted to connect those local change makers to the visitors. So that's why the tour is designed like that we always go to visit them. So you always meet them, you talk to them, you learn about their, story and why they do what they do. And then it really has a different impact, on the visitor, but also on the host community, to see the interest of people. The other part of the concept of detours is that I believe that you as a customer or a visitor, you have a right to know where your money goes. So I created a impact wheel, I call it. So it's like a little donut where you a percentage, how much percent goes to the local community from the price that you paid, how much goes to a guide, how much goes to detours, how much is the tour cost. So it's really another principle that I strongly believe that, the same way, like when you buy your food and you look, back in your nutritional value, the same should be applied also in other product in travel, I believe, so that where your money goes. And last but not least, a detour also evokes that it's in a different part of the city. So I try to take people to off the beaten path neighborhoods that they would not, discover on their own.
Anyone who knows me vaguely will know I am desperate to get to Switzerland now and take Diana's ethical chocolate walking tour. It sounds like my idea of everything I want to do rolled up in one. So I'll be there as soon as I can, Diana, and thanks for chatting. Now, my final guest today is Sam Combs, and I chatted with him from his family's retreat business in Belize. Behind him, so I could see the pyramids behind Susanna, but behind Sam, I could see this lush rainforest view in Belize. And he said, as we finished our call, he said, it's coming to be peak toucan time. All the toucans will be flying around, which seems absolutely incredible to me. There's no toucans in my backyard, so it was pretty cool. Anyway, as part of this topic, I asked Sam to tell me his thoughts on regenerative travel.
So I just had my birthday. I was born on October 12th, so I'm like a very central Libra. So I kind of like look for a balance, I think, in things. And this is one of the topics where I think it's important to remember to look for balance. Because I think this idea can be viewed through a couple of different lenses. One of the things that comes to mind for me is that sort of like, it can almost be like an oxymoron, because I think that kind of inherently when we are traveling, we're sort of like more resource inefficient, right? Like when you're like in your home base, it's like you kind of like get only what you need. You're probably not like burning jet fuel to go anywhere on a regular basis. You're not. So like, I'm sort of hesitant to like think that, we can really like, sufficiently regenerate the earth, like doing regenerative travel, because it's probably the more we stay in one place, the better we'll probably all be. But true, I think that, again, if you look at it from this sort of balance perspective, there are lots of opportunities to learn something when perhaps regenerative travel is the focus of your travel, that you can then take home to your sort of home base and implement, and maybe make some really big waves in your local community, and maybe do, make some changes in your personal life. I mean, I remember like the first time I encountered, because growing up, we didn't have like a community composting system where I lived, right? And then I don't remember where, but I was on a travel somewhere. I was traveling somewhere, and I encountered this idea of composting, and it was like, oh, wait a minute, I don't have to throw like food into the garbage can and then like have it, stink up my kitchen garbage until it's like I can put this in my freezer, or just like bring it somewhere and it'll actually help other plants grow. Like, this is a great idea. Like, why aren't we all doing this? And so, but yeah, so like for me, that's, a key component of sort of regenerative travel, is like going places where perhaps they have adopted systems that maybe are, foreign to you, or new ideas for you, and being able to onboard some of those ideas and take them home with you. One of the, so like we sort of bill ourselves here at Sattva as a permaculture farm as well. And so Klauko, my brother-in-law, and Julia, my partner, they both did a permaculture design course when they arrived here in Belize. And, so the permaculture element of what we're doing here is sort of front and center as well. And so I think that's like an opportunity, again, for people to sort of like come to a place, learn some new things, and take it home with them. I don't know how familiar. I mean, so for me, permaculture is something that I've been learning about. I mean, I was learning about it before I came to here, but it's something that I've been doing sort of a deep dive on since I've been here. And for me, and for perhaps people that haven't heard of it before, or haven't worked with it before, it's basically like a system of working with nature, of like sort of learning how to integrate with the complex systems of nature and be a bridge between the work of human beings and sort of the development of human beings and like this sort of closed loop ecosystem of the natural world.
It's a good description.
Yeah, I mean, for me, that's again, and this sort of ties into what we were talking about before with wellness travel. It's like if you can be intentional about learning something about being regenerative or sustainable, or any other sort of like buzzword that you want to use. If you can if you can focus on that in your travel, and like obviously there are little things that you can do along your way, right? It's like maybe you pack some food containers with you from home, right? You take those with you on your journey. So it's like when you're in transit, you can say no to like the styrofoam container, and you can say no to these things. So you sort of like become as low waste as you can be in transit. Mm-hmm. But yeah, for me, like that's one of the main components of this idea of regenerative travel is like learning things, taking them home, but then also like planning well ahead of time to be able to sort of have the smallest impact that you can along the way.
Yeah. I really related to Sam's ideas about learning things on your travels that then impact, kind of sustainability and other, the environment and so on once you're back home. I vividly remember when I was 14, so some decades ago, being in Germany and realising that at the supermarket there were no plastic bags and you either had to bring your own or pay for a paper bag. And that's in the 90s, early 90s, and it's only in the last few years that's happened in Australia, but it was something I was aware of and very keen to address as soon as I could. So I think that that's an important aspect of the benefits of travel in this area as well. So lots and lots and lots of food for thought there. I hope that you found this episode as interesting as I have. I'd like to say a huge thanks to my guests. First up, I chatted with Dr Susanne Etti from Intrepid Travel. Of course, you can find more about them at intrepidtravel.com. I then chatted with Diana Fischer from Detours Zürich, and you can find all the information about her tours at detours-zurich.ch. And lastly, I chatted with Sam Combs from the Sattva Retreat Centre in Belize, and you can find more information about that amazingly gorgeous place at sattvaland.com. Sattva is Sattva. Don't forget, of course, come and join our conversations in Facebook or LinkedIn. We've got Thoughtful Travellers groups on each, and just look in the show notes or search for Thoughtful Travellers in those platforms and you should find us. And all of this information and more will be in the show notes for this episode. They are at notaballerina.com/281. As always, thank you so much for listening. This has been another episode of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Show notes and other information are at notaballerina.com/podcast. Join me again soon for another chat about why we travel. Bye for now.